Should be going live in about 5 seconds. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. We're really excited to have Joanna with us today. She is joining us all the way from Kenya. So Joanna, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. For those of you who are tuning in, Joanna is here to discuss Sustainable Development Goal 8, which is decent work and opportunities. We're also joined by Wendy, who's the Marketing Director for Gone West. So Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to just take a quick moment to introduce yourself to those of you who may not be so familiar with your work?
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for having me. So I founded a company called Soko Kenya 11 years ago. I'm from London and was working in the fashion industry, and I had grown up kind of with a passion for social justice and a love of the fashion industry, and sort of assumed that those two couldn't support each other and be connected. And 11 years ago, there was very little talk about sustainability in the fashion industry. It was very mostly on a government and industry level, rather than something that connected to consumers and that people were aware of. It was at the time when kind of fair trade tea and coffee was coming out, but not much about the fashion industry. And as I started researching, I realized that actually there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And I think I assumed that, it had been like the box had been ticked, it was sorted. And then I realized with the complexity of the industry, it crosses farming, to waste, to, to body image, so many different parts of to address that there were a lot of challenges. And so my very naive, inexperienced vision to start Soko Kenya was that could I create something that would use the fashion industry as a vehicle for positive impact, and something that through work enabled people to lift themselves out of poverty. I've got a presentation shall I share that now?
Yeah.
That just kind of gives a bit more of a visual background.
Yeah, sure. So just whilst you do that, I wanted to share a little anecdote from myself. So I actually came across Joanna's work when I was almost 7 years ago in a workshop with Jacqueline Shaw, who runs Africa Fashion Guide. And at that time, I was, very similar to you, a bit frustrated with fashion and the way it was really not supporting communities that it operated in. So when I was introduced to your work, and I'm born in Kenya, so just to see that, I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe something so fantastic is happening. So having you here is a really great moment for me, but I think also for all the audience, because I really believe what you guys have done is really phenomenal. So I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you. So when I was asked to be a part of this and talk about the Sustainable Development Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, I thought I should, do my homework. And obviously we're all aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, but kind of looking more deeply into what this one was. There were just a few slides of text, the others are pretty pictures. So what does decent work mean? Decent work means opportunities for everyone to get work that is productive and delivers a fair income, security in the workplace, and social protection for families, better prospects for personal development and social integration. It is also important that all women and men are given equal opportunities in the workplace. A continued lack of decent work opportunities, insufficient investments, and underconsumption lead to an erosion of the basic social contract underlying democratic societies that all must share in progress. what can we do to fix these issues? Providing youth the best opportunity to transition to a decent job calls for investing in education and training of the highest possible quality, providing youth with skills that match labour market demands, giving them access to social protection and basic services, regardless of their contract type, as well as levelling the playing field so that all aspiring youth can attain productive employment regardless of their gender, income level or socioeconomic background. So when I read that, I was like, yes, you know, this is like everything that I am so passionate about and have kind of spent the last 11 years in my very small way trying to see come into reality where I am in Kenya.
That's why you were like our first choice.
Oh, thanks. So what is Soko Kenya? We're a clothing manufacturer that puts people, communities and life at the heart of everything we do. So this is our factory. So as I said, I started 11 years ago. There are 4 of us and we've grown organically since then. My team of 4 that I started with are still with me, and they are the supervisors, the managers of the team. And we're now 116 people. Someone came to visit us and wrote this post. When you think of a factory, I bet you don't think of a light, airy building with green space outside and warm, happy vibes from the workforce, which I loved. And was just felt like, yes, this is what I want us to be. So we're a clothing manufacturer that produces for other brands, just like any clothing factory in the world. A brand will come to us with their designs and we'll produce and ship for them. And here is the team. So last year we moved into a new space, a very kind of stale factory building, and it was important to me that we continued to have that feel of, you know, natural light is so important for our mental health and well-being, and having a space where the team could, you know, have lunch together, where we could have team meetings together. So this is just outside the factory. This is Joseph. And these are some of our products that we've produced over the years for different clients. So we produce both menswear and women's wear, both jersey, so t-shirt types, and woven. So 6 years ago, I was trying to grow the business, and I was really struggling to find people with the skills that we needed in the factory. And the people that were coming from the big cities, and I really wanted to create jobs in the area where we were. And so we started the Soko Community Trust, which is our charity. And as part of that, our first project was the Stitching Academy. So we looked around for what training curriculum is there in the country that's vocational, that means that at the end you have the skills to get a job in a factory, that doesn't include all the kind of stuff like the fillers that take time but aren't necessarily relevant to just getting a job, which is what so many people in Kenya need. And so my team and I wrote a curriculum that's 4 months long. And to date, we've had 183 people, mostly women. It's open to everyone, but mostly women come through our school, and 2/3 of them are in formal employment. And a number of them are with us and then with different factories around the country, or have started their own business. And here's one of our graduations. So our second major project under the Kajura initiative, under the Stitching Academy and the Soko Community Trust, is the Kajura initiative. So Kajura means knowledge, and my passion, I guess, is to enable women to have the same opportunities as men, and to find themselves, to try to look at how we can support with removing barriers. So one of the barriers that we found with my community trust team was that girls didn't have sanitary products during their period. A lot of them didn't have underwear. So they were missing a quarter of the year, staying at home. And also there was you know, it was something dirty and secret and not talked about, and something that you struggle to talk to teachers about and parents about. I mean, this is the world over, but in Kenya it feels even more extreme. And so we looked at how, you know, if we're wanting to make an impact on the lives of women, we need to start with girls. And so the KAJU initiative was formed, and we take offcuts from the factory, so fabric that would normally be waste, and we turn them into washable sanitary pads, and we have been distributing them in schools with girls, and doing training for. We started with training for girls, and then we realized, I mean, it's obvious that, you know, if you're only reaching girls, then they're kind of fighting against something and fighting and trying to share their knowledge to their communities that haven't also heard it. So then we moved on to doing training for boys in schools, for teachers and for parents, so it's around sexual reproductive health and rights, how a woman's body works. I mean, I think a lot of the boys, even in the UK, couldn't really explain that, but the kind of, and gaining some respect for women and what their bodies go through each month. And the hope with all of this work is that we can encourage girls to stay in school, we can encourage parents to not push girls into early marriage, and or not seeing that it's important for them to be in school, and for these girls to believe in themselves and the bright future that they have ahead. And here's some of the girls. And what's great about it is that because the majority of the fabrics that we work within the factory are really bright and vibrant, they're getting something that looks beautiful. It's not kind of grey and ugly. And we have the washable sanitary pad has gone through multiple design phases, and we've got lots and lots of feedback to try and make it something that really is a product that people want to use and is effective. So I wanted to talk a bit about, I'll stop in a sec, about, you know, there's a lot of talk about eco, ethical, sustainable, and I feel like those words are kind of becoming empty now, because people are using them and no one really knows what they mean, and they're not necessarily grounded on anything. So I wanted to talk about, as a factory and as an organization, what we do and why I'm here talking about decent work. So there are 4 main areas. So the first one is finance. So we pay our employees a living wage. So I'll just read it here for everyone. Remuneration received for a standard work week by a worker in a particular place sufficient to afford a decent standard of living for the worker and her or his family. Elements of a decent standard of living include food, water, housing, education, healthcare, transport, clothing, and other essential needs, including provision for unexpected events. So we have done a lot. We spent a few months on an internationally recognized process of how to calculate what a living wage is. So a living wage in one town is different from another, to ensure that the wages that we were paying were living wages, which means that they are not just about kind of basic survival, but there is a bit extra for people to invest in their futures. So also around finance, we do financial literacy training. So what I was finding was the majority of my team have never been in formal employment before. So when you get a job, you get a bank account, and then the bank comes to you and offers you a loan. And my team, so then what we found was that the banks were then coming to us a few months later saying, does this person still work for you? they've defaulted on their loan, and we're going to hold their salary for the next 2 months until they have paid it back. And what we learned was that kind of money management was something that people hadn't experienced, hadn't been modeled to them, and there was a lot of my team in debt and not getting another loan to pay back the previous loan, and the kind of concept of, for example, you've got your child's school fees in 3 months, what do you need to save each month? Is that realistic to be able to pay those? And so my community trust team are awesome trainers in that, and we do regular financial literacy training. So the second area is health and well-being. So we provide tea and bread and a hot meal every day. And that for some of my team is the only meal that they have in the day. We provide nursery support. So from 2 until school age, anyone can send their children to the nursery that we have partnered with, which for women is a big thing. And we also do medical training, so family planning, HIV and AIDS training, and similar with sexual reproductive health. And we also provide medical care, so we have a company doctor that everyone goes to and can access free medication. And then the third point is education. So factories globally, kind of large scale factories, someone will join on day one, 10 years later, they're still doing the same job that they did the day they arrived. So for example, sewing a side seam. So they want to leave, but they don't actually have any real value or additional skills that they've gained. So career progression is really important to me, and I think everyone would agree that if you feel like there's an opportunity for you to move up the ladder and be promoted, it's a huge motivation. And as I mentioned, the 4 people that started with me are now managing massive teams and doing amazing job. And then the fourth area is sustainability. So we, which is another word that's possibly a bit empty, but for us that means when we moved into our factory space a year ago, we bought 2 10,000 litre water tanks, and those collect all our rainwater. So our factory fully functions from rainwater for both drinking water. So we have a water filtration system through an amazing organisation called LifeStraw, and all of our production water for steam irons, etc., cleaning, are through our rainwater. We also have 25% of our power usage is through solar panels, which we've installed. And as I mentioned earlier, all of our fabric waste goes to either our Kujira initiative, our washable sanitary pad project, or to other community groups. So that's kind of an overview that I thought I'd start with. And just really quickly to talk about COVID, because that's what, where we all are.
Yeah.
So when that hit Kenya, we looked as a team at what could we do with the skills that we have to be of support. And so we created these hygiene packs, which includes 4 masks. So we managed to ASOS, we produced the ASOS Made in Kenya collection, and they're one of our main clients, and we had some dead stock fabric of theirs, and they agreed that we could use that dead stock fabric and they would fund us to produce 20,000 masks for donation. So I think altogether we've produced 30,000, and it's a legal requirement in Kenya that anyone in public needs to be wearing a mask. So 30,000 masks. Our community trust team were making sanitary pads, and then we worked with a community group where we were sourcing from around the county used water bottles, and they were making liquid soap, and we were filling them with liquid soap, and then this is our hygiene pack that we then partnered with the Red Cross to distribute to the most vulnerable communities in our area. And then this is one of our lovely ladies. So I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Wow, just wow.
I had to hold back the like proud tears.
Yeah, honestly, Joanna, you're a real inspiration. Oh God, I feel a little bit teary.
Oh, don't, because you're sorry.
You're doing some absolutely incredible work. But it was so funny that you mentioned, oh God, it was so funny that you mentioned about the factory, because that was exactly what I wrote in my notes. Coming from a fashion background and looking at your factory, it's just so unusual to see that space being so light, being so airy, not being filled wall to wall with sewing machines. And yeah, it just seems like you've created a wonderful environment for all of your workers. I wanted to ask you, because I know that obviously you live in Kenya, and do you think your company would have achieved what it has today if you hadn't have actually moved there and now live within that community and within your business?
No. You know, now it's now I feel like we're a bit more grown up. It's definitely changed, but in the early days, you know, I was there. We first started in a shed, and then we moved to a polytechnic, which, I mean, it was hilarious. It was like metal, a roof with a welding classroom next to us. The heat was insane. The noise was insane. But it was just part of our growth. And yeah, I was there every day, in and out. And, you know, when we started, I did everything. It wouldn't have worked if I hadn't have been so hands-on. And what's awesome now is that, you know, I've managed to have 3 children, not necessarily have a maternity leave, but not had to be there every day, and have an amazing management team that allow me space to have a life as well. And I think, you know, as I feel awkward saying this word, but I'm growing into it. As an entrepreneur, there are so many things that I'm really not good at. And because I'm someone that starts things and is excited, but, you know, employee contracts, or how our dismissal process works, or those things are not my strong point. And over the years, I've managed to build a team who are really passionate about those things, that then come to me and say, right, I've put this together, what do you think? And we talk through it, rather than me having to hold everything. And if I had to, it wouldn't be a very healthy organization.
Oh, that's great. And then I also wanted to ask you, obviously you mentioned that you originally came from a fashion background, or you'd worked in that industry. And did that really, I'm just thinking about how, when you started out, and how hard it was for you to be able to like build that connection, that relationship with the collection of ASOS, and get your products and get business coming through your organization.
Yeah, I think the fact that I had been in London and in the fashion industry and connected, that I couldn't have done it without that, and without the people that I knew, and the people that knew the people that I knew, you know, and that and it was at the time when the ethical conversation was just starting. And so I was there at that time, which and there were kind of very few people around at that time, and now it's obviously much more mainstream, but so that definitely helped.
I have a question too. So obviously, you know, you've been in Kenya for a fair amount of time now, but what was the original decision to choose Kenya to start this whole journey?
So my husband and I were in London, and we decided that we wanted a kind of like adult gap year, so to speak. before we found ourselves, like, you know, on the treadmill of London and mortgages and career ladder. And my husband's an artist, so we were living in a tiny flat. He was painting the kitchen, and I kind of had to shuffle past to make a cup of tea. And it was about him having space to, like, financial and physical space to grow his career without the pressure of living in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And so that was the original idea. And then through my work, we ended up on a trip to Kenya and had a conversation. So we were kind of open, we were looking for something. So he was sorted, but it was, what was I going to do? And through that conversation, the idea came about. And because of my work, I knew that I felt like there was a need for a manufacturer, or to create more of a connection between the people who make our clothes and you know, the big shops that we enter. And so that's, I guess, where it all started. And we kind of said, oh yeah, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years, very naively, and 11 years on, we're still here.
Oh, it's, yeah, well, it's a beautiful country, and beautiful people, and seems like there's a lot of sort of local indigenous references in the designs of your fabrics, and the designs of your clothing. And are you mainly design focused, or do you have a lot of local people that also assist you with design and honouring the heritage of the country?
So actually all the designs are done by the clients. So we don't have, we're not involved in the design process. And there are some lovely partnerships that have happened. For example, the ASOS design team at certain points have given my team a brief to go. So we've worked with a local primary school and supplied them with a load of paints and paper and given them a brief. So one year it was, or one season it was, paint what you see when you look out the window. Another it was the night sky. And then the fabric designers will kind of turn their work into prints that go on the garments. And I think for me, it's really important that we are, you know, based in Kenya, and the vibrancy of that comes out in, like, through our website and how we talk about ourselves. But we, you know, we have in the past as well produced grey linen garments. You know, we are a manufacturer open to work with anybody. The Africa thing is just part of our story, but it doesn't necessarily need to be translated in the garments.
No, I think that's wonderful. So another question that I think a lot of people ask when we talk about sustainable development, and we look at, okay, where, as you know, founders or entrepreneurs, can we go to create that impact? And I think there is a bit of a stigma associated with, you know, creating impact in other parts of the world, particularly Africa. So of course, any new business is challenging, and going to a different country on top of that is equally challenging. But over and above that, from your experience, what did you find were probably the toughest challenges at the beginning when you started?
I think that, so just to answer that in a second, just to go back to that, for me, you know, being a white woman coming to Kenya and like, I'm going to help all these people, for me, it was about, how can I use my privilege, the fact that I've been born in had a great education, born in a middle-class family in the UK, to create a link between people that really need help and a step up, and the wealth that we see in my home country. And for me, a moment when that all came together for me was when so Michelle Obama and her daughters did a trip around Africa, and this was in the early days. I can't remember exactly. I think it's probably 9 years ago. and I opened my laptop and all of these Google alerts came through, and Michelle Obama had worn a jacket. She's since then, I think she's worn 3 items made by us, but she'd worn a jacket made by us. And Kenyans are so proud of Obama's heritage, and the fact that he was the president of the United States, and that's so aspirational. And so I went round to my team with my laptop, like, look, here's Michelle Obama. They were like, oh, is there another factory, like a proper factory making the same clothes as us? And I was like, no, we made that. Like, she's wearing something that we made. And just being able to create that connection was like, okay, my work's done, kind of thing. Just for my team and myself to feel so much pride that she had chosen to wear that garment was huge. So going back to your question, I think that starting out as a 28-year-old woman, that's white in a manufacturing industry. Like I would go to kind of, there's a Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I'd go to their meetings. I was the only woman, I was the only person under 40, which I'm nearly close to now. And I was the only white person. And I mean, even now people will say to me, oh, are you studying here? But I guess the other side of that is that everyone would help me, because they were like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing. Like, so I had like uncles and, you know, older brothers all around me, and probably with your experience of Kenyan, Amisha, you know, you can relate to that. Totally. And so there's like pros and cons to that. And I do think kind of looking vulnerable and looking like I need help has also really helped me in a lot of ways.
You got to use what you've got, right?
Yeah.
No, but I can totally resonate with that, because, and it's one of the reasons I asked the questions, because as in having been born in Kenya myself, I do get a lot of that response around, oh, it must be so hard to do business there, or, you know, it's really challenging, or there's corruption, or there's this or that. And it's always like a deterrent for people to not explore or go beyond that point. But it's really encouraging for everyone watching to see, you know, what you have done, because it just proves to people that you can make it. And it's just about how committed, resourceful, and, you know, how thoughtful you are with how you do these things. So yeah, that's really positive to see.
Thank you.
Wendy, do you have any questions?
I did, but they've gone out of my head. I'm sure they'll come back to me. Are there any questions from the audience at the moment?
Yes, I'll just check.
But yeah, I wanted to ask, you know, I know that you mentioned, you know, as a white woman in Kenya, but I just wondered what the industry is like there, and actually whether you felt that it was easier for you as a white woman as opposed to being a black woman.
I don't think so. I think that Kenya, there are a lot of inspiring, strong female professionals, leaders in the country. And so, and to be honest, probably I would feel more support from the men than the women. I'm thinking about that, if I agree with that, in positions of power. I think that the difference here is that it tends to be that there isn't a lot of humility in leadership, and that's not really modeled. So if you are successful, you know, if you're a business owner, you know it from how you look. You've got the big watch, the lots of jewelry, the shiny shoes, the smart car, and I think for me, it's taken me a long time to feel confident in myself and my style of leading my team and my style of my personality to know that that's not weakness, and that there's kind of strength in vulnerability and strength in not having all the answers. And I do think that because of that, I hope that my team feel that we're in it together, and that that they have just as many answers as I do to things that we're trying to work through.
Amazing. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you is that I think, for us, we could have showcased you under a number of the different sustainable development goals, whether that was gender equality or education. You're really doing so much incredible work, and it's just it's definitely not centered around just one in particular thing. So in the community around you, with the wider community that your workers are part of, what sort of trickle down effects do you think the community have benefited from your company?
That's a good question.
Oh, I think we've lost her.
Let's see. I'll give it a moment or two. We've already got lots of questions coming through, so we'll wait for her to hop back on. But how did you find that, Wendy? I think we both had to hold our tears back.
It's just incredibly inspiring, and just a fantastic example of, the fashion industry has a really bad reputation, and quite understandably so. I think, I think that reputation is quite warranted in a lot of cases. And even in some of the sustainable brands that we do see, I think it's very rare to have somebody that just has this really holistic view, and so well-rounded view of the support and the benefits, that it's not just a job, it's training opportunities, it's career progression past the factory itself, and opening doors for people, it's gender equality, it's building that community and that support network. It's incredibly inspiring. And I think the work that she's doing is wonderful. Hopefully she'll be back with us.
Yes, we do.
I'm back. Hi.
So I've got some questions from the audience. So one person from Kenya who says that though I joined late, I can attest for what Joanna shared. Such a proof producer, solution fixer at the grassroots level. That's very nice. Bypass the middlemen and gatekeepers to touch the lives of communities. Thank you so much for all you do in that little part of Kenya. Oh,
that's so nice.
That is really nice to hear. Then this is a really interesting question. It says, I'd like to ask Joanna if she ever felt imposter syndrome on her early days, especially being a white woman in Africa, and how did she overcome it?
It's such an interesting question, because I felt imposter syndrome this morning. Yesterday I was invited, I did a lady that I've known for a long time in the ethical fashion arena is now an instructor for sustainable fashion at Harvard, and she invited me to do a lecture, and I went to bed last night with it just all going through. I'm not an academic, I'm a doer. I was always kind of very average at school. I'm not very good at remembering stats, and this morning I just was like, why did I say yes? I don't know. And I think that I'll just have imposter syndrome forever. And I think I'm just very stubborn is a negative word, but I love trying to figure out solving problems. So that always keeps me going. Yeah.
I love that. And then another one, I really like this question. It says, which resources, Joanna, do you think you'd recommend for someone who's kickstarting or thinking about solving these issues in fashion without delaying any of the, as you describe, taking action?
So what resources? I think that for me anyway, when I started, it was all about having conversations. Before I started, I talked to people about this idea that felt kind of, it was like, you know, a 6-year-old saying that I was going to go to the moon, like no experience, no real knowledge. And so I think it's like soak everything in, soak as much in as you can, and be prepared for negative feedback. Yeah, I can't think resources. I'd be interested what the,
like, you know, websites or stuff you can look at.
Yeah, I think it's if there's a kind of mentorship program or a
fashion and sustainable fashion communities, which
Yeah.
can also be a great way of just delving in a little bit behind the scenes to see what challenges other people are facing, and then the feedback that they're getting from the community as to how to overcome those. Also as a networking platform to be able to potentially link up and connect with, you know, different elements of your business in terms of sourcing or manufacturing. So there's some really useful communities online as well that I would recommend.
Okay, fantastic. Then one more question, which is, how can we support the work of your community initiative, so your charity, the Soko Trust?
Yeah. So we've had a few people ask us that recently, I think because of the work we've been doing around COVID-19. And my main thing is asking people to champion us, you know, talk about us, share what we do, spread the work, because we're looking, so for the business, the reason for growing a year ago and moving to the new space was in order to take on some clients. So that's what I'm kind of actively working on. And then through the Kajira initiative and the Stitching Academy School, looking at new partnerships. So the Kajira initiative has been we've been testing it out. We've been on a journey with it. And now I really want to look at how can we really scale this up? Is it partnerships with a brand that wants to, you know, when you buy a dress, we donate this to a project in Kenya? Or is it a, you know, Unilever type sanitary product company that would be interested in partnering with us? Or is it an NGO who does work in Kenya who would consider buying our sanitary pads to be distributing in schools? Because there are initiatives here for disposable sanitary pad distribution, but when the funding runs dry or it gets diverted, these girls who have been relying on that don't have access anymore. And our sanitary pads, one is the cost of one is the equivalent of a month and a half of disposable, and they last for 3 years. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier is, so with the Kajira initiative, so we train the women through the Stitching Academy. Some of them come to work in our factory, other factories start their own business. Some of them come and work for the Kajira initiative. So we're training them, giving them jobs, taking waste from our factory to then produce pads that some of which will go to their children and their neighbours and community.
It's such a more sustainable product as well, which is fantastic, rather than the disposable pads. Yeah, and
yeah, especially here where the waste management systems are non-existent, and so waste ends up going in the sea or being eaten by cows and goats, or being picked through by people who live off the rubbish dumps.
Yeah, and I think like that's also I think people don't appreciate those sorts of challenges when they, you know, just reflect on what the kind of work you do. So that actually brings me on to a question I had, which is, obviously Kajira initiative is a great way of reusing, you know, the waste that comes through the factory or the fabric offcuts. Have you thought of other things like this, or have you got other pieces in the pipeline? Like I know you mentioned you've 25% of the factory runs on solar. So, are you guys also open to partners coming and helping you kind of like scale that up to 100% or, anything along that remit?
Definitely. And the 25% is based on what we could afford. Installation of solar panels isn't cheap. And so we decided, let's start there and see where we can go from there. And then we look at everything. So with our waste, our like lunch waste, food waste gets collected by a pig farmer who uses it for their pigs. So it's like, you can't hear, you have to be creative in how to use your waste. I mean, that is for me personally and my family as well. It's like I can't bear to just drop it off at the dump. And that's why with the COVID-19 plastic bottles, it's like, I think we collected kind of 6,000 plastic bottles that were then filled with liquid soap. That has just given that, obviously that bottle is still, just given it one more life, and it will ultimately end up in the bin. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I have a question related to COVID-19. The audience member asks, how has COVID-19 impacted Soko's business? So I need to a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's all about the long term is where so initially it was about the immediate, like what is going to happen? Is the country going to go into lockdown? Are we going to be closed? If we're closed, what cash flow do we have to be able to pay salaries for how long? And can we get support from any of our clients to cover those costs if we run out? Thankfully, we weren't closed. The country put a curfew on, so everyone had to be home by 7. So all businesses had to close by 4. So we had reduced hours, and the officials came around to assess us in terms of our social distancing, hygiene, etc. And we just, because we still do have some additional space, we managed to spread everybody out. And the thing is, for my team, I believe it was the best place for them to be, because we could maintain social distancing, which at home, for people who everyone lives very communally, it's very hard. So we could afford soap and hand sanitizer. Everyone had a meal every day, and we could keep the company alive while also trying to support our team. So that's the factory side. And for the community trust side, we had to close our stitching academy, our sewing training school, because all sewing institutions, all educational institutions were closed, and they still are. And so we had to look at how we could pivot there. And we immediately started mass production and selling masks and we priced the masks at a price where they were accessible to anybody. And the hope was people who had a bit of extra money would just buy a few and hand them out. And that meant that we also had some income coming in through the Soko Community Trust. And then we moved from masks to our sanitary pads for the hygiene packs. But I think it's all about the long-term impact, and no one knows what that is yet. So I got on the phone to our clients and found out from them how long their commitment could be. And then we've got to see, long-term, everyone's trying to survive.
Right. And I think nobody really knows what will happen next, but it's really encouraging to hear that, you had the support of not just your community, but also your clients, because we've seen some really sad stories here in the UK about production houses not getting paid or just stuck with so much dead stock. So it's I mean, that was one of the other questions. It said, have you suffered the same way other production houses globally have suffered, which is encouraging to not the case.
Yeah, I think it's really, really tough. But the clients that we work with are more like partners, and they're, you know, because of our story, they have supported us, which makes it easier that, you know, there's just factories that are already possibly not treating their employees well and paying for all the hours they work, etc. And then further.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So another question that was emailed to me before this session. So I have a few that were emailed before your session even began. This one says, based on the fact that your business is focused very much on sustainability, does that influence how you choose partners or clients to work with? So I think what they're trying to say is, if you feel a client isn't operating at a sustainable level as a bigger brand, would you still choose to work with them? It's a tough question.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, because I think that I can't solve the problems of the world, and I think that if they're choosing to work with us, then they are aware of. Yeah, it's an interesting question, because there's the whole greenwashing going on around, and that a brand could, you know, talk about all the work that they do with us, which is 1% of the work, you know, the products that are produced. And I guess for me, it is, my goal is to support my team to grow, to create as many jobs as I can. And so they're enabling me to do that. And,
yeah, I mean, I would argue that if it is, you know, willing to come and work with you, they already have a level of understanding that they want to either shift or pivot or support, you know, companies like yourself as a part of their production capacity. So I still think that's a step in the right direction, because I think something we also get very caught up in, we were talking about this yesterday in one of the sessions, is almost this cancel culture, where we feel like if someone's done one thing wrong or a brand has done one thing wrong, then we just kind of chalk them off and never really give them the chance to say, okay, well, we recognize what we've done and we're going to do it better. So I think just them, you know, for whoever who sent in the question, you know, I think that brand advocating for Soko, or, you know, choosing Soko as a supplier is already that step in supporting sustainability.
I also think that from the point of view is that as Soko, you can demonstrate the benefits of working with an organization that is focused on, you know, being, you know, that, you know, having that ethical side and making sure that what you do is a benefit to your community, treating workers fairly, and actually demonstrating to them that they can still achieve the results that they want by using a factory like yours. So by just ruling them out, where else are they going to go? Are they going to go back to the factories that they're working with that maybe don't have these, you know, particularly good working conditions? Or are you going to take it upon yourself to showcase that actually, no, we can do a fantastic job, and you're going to benefit as well by showcasing yourself as a responsibly sourcing your products?
Yeah, 100%.
Another question. Wow, Joanna, you've got so many people asking questions. This is really encouraging. So she says, the work you're doing is so amazing. How feasible do you think it is for it to occur on a much broader scale across the entire fashion industry and related communities?
Another massive question. I think that it can only happen. I think that the fashion industry is so complex, and you know, we've got farmers in fields, we've got factories turning cotton into fabric. We've got so many processes going along the way, and I think that it's only possible if clothes aren't as cheap. And so it hits, because it's not possible to do what we do and for clothes to be as cheap as they are. And I think that it needs, as a consumer, we can do as much as we can do and choose responsibly, but all the consumers in the world aren't going to do that, and a lot of consumers don't have the additional income to be able to make that choice. The retailers, the brands, have shareholders who are bothered about profits, and so I'm not an economist, I'm not an academic, as I said, but I believe it's a government level to create structures that within that these companies need to work within in order for us to see change.
Yeah, and I think that there is quite kind of a lack of oversight on the fashion industry, from a government point of view. I think it often happens that we only learn about really bad practices when it's too late, like, when we saw what happened in places like Bangladesh. I do think that as consumers, people are becoming far more aware of that as these stories start to evolve. And I think that the biggest thing as individuals that we can do, like we've said in a few of these conversations over the last couple of days, is vote with your wallet. If you have the money to, if you're fortunate enough to have the money to buy sustainably, then do it. But I think is also if you don't have the money to buy sustainably, then it's just the reduction of consumption in itself. So I think that a lot of people out there, and I'm sure I've done it in the past, you buy things because they are cheap, not necessarily because you need them, and it's great to have lower price point goods incomes, but it's about just making sure that you're consuming responsibly and that you're not just necessarily buying things all the time for the sake of having something new.
Yeah, I mean, no, go ahead, Joanna.
Go ahead. I do think it's about value. I feel like when I was a teenager, I valued things that, because things weren't super cheap, I valued things more, because I couldn't go and buy something every weekend. And I think that we don't treasure things as much because everything's so accessible. It's about, if you walk around the factory and you see the step by step of how a garment's made, and we're trying to be better at talking about that on social media, then just the number of hands that have touched a garment, the number of thought process that have gone through, not just in the production phase where we are, but right from design, fabric selection, print, all of that, all the way through. And it's like, I feel like we need to be encouraged to kind of look at an item of clothing and get that. And Ursula de Castro, who is the founder of Fashion Revolution, who's an awesome lady, talks about that your clothes should be like a love story, and you should look at them and they hold so many memories for you of all of the experiences that you've had wearing them, and that they should be treasured. And I love the thought of that.
Yeah, me too. And I think also it's just some little insight I'd like to share. My company was part of a study where we were looking at generationally, how is buyer behavior changing, right? So if you look at like millennials versus Gen Zers, and obviously they didn't study fashion, but they studied social platforms. So they were looking at how do Gen Zers move on and off social platforms. And one of the interesting things that they found was the generation millennial and below is actually heavily socially conscious. And so they actually will choose not to buy from a brand if they are aware that it's not socially or ethically responsible. So Elizabeth, who asked the question, I think this is kind of to your point, where we say we may not see it happen at a broad scale in terms of seeing fashion so well and ethically produced across the board in like 10 years, but we're definitely seeing a movement. And I think in a generation's time, with all this awareness, our buying behavior will change, because it's to your point what you said, Joanna, like we used to live like this just 30 years ago. Like I remember in Kenya, we didn't even have clothes when I grew up there. You know, our parents or my mom would be the one like stitching all my uniforms and all this kind of stuff. So we also, you know, we've all been exposed to that sort of mentality, if not through us, at least through our parents. So we sometimes forget it's just a case of shifting back to that and not kind of going with what we've been doing for the last 20 years. But I think there is hope in terms of the generations to come have a much more social awareness of how they shop and what they buy.
Yeah, and I do think that there is a demand on brands now to have a sustainability policy, to, you know, and compared to 11 years ago when I started Soko, we're in a very different place. You know, there are a lot of expectations on brands. They're all, the larger ones are publishing their sustainability reports every year, and there is the expectation, and so we are moving, but it's such a huge multifaceted industry that it can't just be like, here's a load of sustainable product made from biodegradable fabric in this beautiful factory, that, etc., etc. It's just, it's too big a machine to change quickly.
Yeah. And I think we had a really interesting insight from a young activist here in the UK who I really want you two to meet each other, because a lot of what he advocates for is what you do. So it's really positive to see. He's a child rights activist, so he's a lot about educating people about what products you buy could have been touched by child labor. So, you know, the points you made. And one of the things he does, which when he shared that, I really thought of you, was he goes to schools, and for different ages, he kind of has conversations with both boys and girls about menstruation, sexual health, all these things. And even he recognized, and this is why I think, you know, the connection between you two is so positive, and also that assurance that young people are actually waking up to these things, where he regularly advocates to young people, please look at the products you buy, look at, you know, what are the practices that these companies engage in when they're creating your product. So I think, you know, it just goes to show that people like you really set that example, and I think it's really positive. And you have a really, really lovely comment from Victoria, who says, I'm so proud to be able to call you my boss. From mentoring us to counseling employees' personal issues. Thanks for showing that no matter how hard bosses crack the whip, they need to have a strong human side to their leadership. You have touched so many lives in so many ways.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Victoria heads up my Soko Community Trust team. So all our work with the Kajur Initiative and the Stitching Academy, all our COVID-19 response stuff. So thanks, Victoria.
Lovely. And then Hannah said, I love that too, Jo. Clothes should hold stories and memories. They are made with love and care, and that's the way they should be worn. I agree. Amen. Yeah. So I think that's majority of the questions that have come in from the audience. I know we've still got a little bit more time left. Was there anything you wanted to cover, Jo?
I think I've talked a lot. I feel that you've caught me off guard now. Yeah, as I think I said before, it's, you know, we would be so grateful for people to talk about us, champion us, spread the work that we're doing, because we're ever growing, we're ever trying to kind of improve on the impact that we're having, and the decisions that we make. So yeah, thanks so much to everybody for coming on and listening.
Well, thank you for joining us. And you already have 2 champions in me and Wendy, and a few other ladies over here who are truly, truly inspired by your work. So I'm sure there are going to be a number of connections coming your way or requests to partner, which, you know, I'm really, really grateful for all of you who do that with Joanna, because yeah, I've been following her work for well, ever since I found out about her. And I really think she is a benchmark for how you do fashion and create great working conditions for people. So thank you so much, Jo, for joining.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Wendy, do you want to say anything?
No, I think I just echo your sentiments. Just thank you for all the work that you're doing. You really are a benchmark, and in an industry that can be so tainted and so well known for, you know, poor working conditions, I just think that you're setting a wonderful example to the rest of the industry, and I just hope that more people follow suit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanna. Bye.
Bye.